Weekend sunlight stretched across the green meadow, and the laughter of three children echoed through the open air. William and Catherine's family were enjoying a rare picnic, one of those precious moments when they could set aside royal protocol and simply be a family. George ran freely across the field, a kite in hand, his face radiant with joy. But only minutes later, that smile vanished. He froze, cheeks flushed red, sweat forming on his forehead, then suddenly stumbled and collapsed. "George, are you okay? Why are you so hot?" Catherine gasped, pulling her son into her arms, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. His temperature was abnormally high. Red rashes began to appear on his neck and shoulders. William immediately called for the medical aid, while Charlotte and Louis clung to their mother in fright. The cheerful atmosphere evaporated, replaced by confusion and fear. Even the rustling wind seemed heavier, every second thick with tension. What do you think is happening to Prince George? Press 1 if you believe it's just a common illness. Press 2 if you suspect the palace is hiding a more serious condition. Early summer sunlight filtered through the trees, laying a soft golden hue over the lush green grass. The laughter of children rose like clear notes in a melody, blending with the breeze and the chirping of birds. It was a rare weekend outing for the royal family, a moment where William, Catherine, and their three children could live like ordinary people, free from ceremony and cameras, surrounded only by laughter and love. In that peaceful scene, Prince George stood out naturally as the heart of it all. At 9 years old, slender yet full of energy, he dashed across the field with a small stick in hand, pretending to be the knight protecting the kingdom. His slightly messy blonde hair fluttered in the wind, his blue eyes shining with intelligence and curiosity. Every gesture radiated confidence and liveliness, the balance of a child raised to understand responsibility, yet still holding on to his innocence. "George, you're too fast. We can't keep up." William laughed, his eyes glowing with pride as he watched his son helping Charlotte set up a small fabric tent. Catherine smiled, wrapping a light scarf around her shoulders, her gaze gentle as she watched her three children play. She knew that behind these simple moments was the dream of every parent, to see their children healthy, free, and happy. George wasn't just playful, he was thoughtful. When Charlotte accidentally spilled the flower basket, George knelt down to pick up each petal and whispered, "It's okay. You can make it again." Catherine's heart softened at that. She saw in him the beginnings of a leader's heart, kind, patient, and compassionate. When the family gathered around the picnic blanket, George eagerly talked about his latest science lesson, how honeybees find flowers and how the earth orbits the sun. His voice was bright, his confidence remarkable for a child his age. Even William couldn't help but laugh. "Looks like our son's a professor today." The royal staff standing nearby smiled warmly, not just because George was a prince, but because he was genuinely delightful and bright. From time to time, George would spring up, run around the meadow, and stop to watch the sunlight shimmer on the lake. He asked his father about the swans, his mother about the clouds. Each question carried a mix of curiosity and thoughtfulness, often making Catherine pause before answering. In one of those quiet moments, William murmured, "Our son will be a different kind of king, one who asks questions before making decisions." Catherine smiled, but her heart fluttered with pride and worry. She knew that as George grew older, expectations would grow heavier. Dave Scheinefagner. Expectations from the family, from the public, and from the destiny written in royal blood. But today, she only wanted him to be a carefree child, laughing under the sun. That afternoon's lunch was warm and lighthearted. Charlotte picked wildflowers by the lake, carefully weaving them into a wreath for her mother. Louis, exhausted from play, had fallen asleep on William's shoulder, and George remained the center of all laughter, talking excitedly about the secret fortress he planned to build under the old oak tree, his eyes sparkling with imagination. William listened with pride, and Catherine quietly captured the moment on her small camera, a picture of simple, perfect happiness. It was a scene of rare peace, the kind the royal family cherished deeply. A soft breeze stirred the oak leaves. Laughter echoed under the clear sky, and for a brief moment it felt as though joy might last forever. But only minutes later, Catherine noticed something was wrong. George was no longer laughing. He sat still, one hand on his forehead, eyes clouded with fatigue. "George, what's wrong?" she asked gently, thinking he might just need rest. But when her hand touched his skin, a wave of heat startled her. William rushed over, calling his son's name. George responded faintly, then leaned sideways, his body unsteady. The smile that had filled the air moments ago was gone, replaced by fear in his parents' eyes. The warmth of a family afternoon vanished in an instant. Charlotte's laughter stopped. On Catherine's face, worry spread fast, like a shadow over the sunlight. "George, what's happening to you?" Her voice trembled. Just moments ago, the boy had been laughing and running. Now he was crouched on the grass, clutching his chest. Sweat poured down his face, his cheeks flushed crimson, his breathing short and shallow. William rushed over, pressing a hand to his son's forehead. It was burning hot. Catherine tried to stay calm, but when she lifted George's shirt, she saw red rashes spreading rapidly across his neck and shoulders. Her heart stopped. "William, these marks, they're spreading fastid," Catherine gasped, her voice trembling on the edge of tears. William immediately signaled to his aide, ordering the car and the Royal Medical Team. The air turned still. Charlotte's laughter vanished. Little Louis began to sob when he saw his mother's terrified face. Catherine pulled him close, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Just breathe. George, Mommy's here. Can you hear me?" She whispered again and again, her voice breaking, her hands trembling uncontrollably. A royal protection vehicle roared to life. William lifted George into his arms, laying him on the back seat, while Catherine sat beside him, holding his small hand tightly. Every passing minute felt like an hour. The fever burned through George's body, and he began murmuring incoherently. "Contact the royal physician immediately. Tell them to move to our location. Now, us," William commanded. The message was relayed within seconds. A special medical response team from London took off by helicopter. Meanwhile, William tried to steady his breathing, glancing constantly at Catherine, the woman now crying and praying beside their son. 30 minutes later, the sound of helicopter blades broke the stillness of the evening sky. Dust and grass swirled in the air. 3 medics stepped out, led by Dr. Stephen Halford, who had served the royal family for over 2 decades. He moved quickly toward George, checking his pulse and temperature. 40 degrees, he murmured. "Rash spreading fast. We need to cool him down and start fluids immediately." The medical case opened with a click. Equipment, syringes, and IV packs were laid out in seconds. Catherine gripped her son's hand, her eyes locked on every motion the doctor made. "Sir William," Dr. Halford said firmly, his tone calm but grave, "I need complete cooperation. No photos, no calls, no messages leaving this area. Everything that happens here must remain confidential." William nodded without hesitation. He knew one rumor about the heir's condition could ignite a media storm. "Understood. Do whatever you must. Confiscate all staff phones now." The only sounds left on the meadow were the faint beeps of medical monitors and George's fragile heartbeat. Catherine sat close, gently wiping sweat from his forehead. Every breath he took felt like a countdown. "Please, please save my boy," she whispered. Dr. Halford listened through his stethoscope, then signaled for the IV. His brows furrowed as the rashes deepened in color. The sunlight faded, replaced by the golden haze of dusk. The air grew heavy. William checked his watch, at 5:42 p.m. Each ticking second echoed in the silence, sharp and unnerving. George began to moan softly, his breathing ragged. Catherine panicked, clutching his hand. "George, can you hear Mommy?" The doctor placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "It's likely a reaction to the fever. Give me a few more minutes." Those minutes felt endless. William stepped back, fists clenched tight. His jaw was rigid, eyes cold and focused. He couldn't show emotion, but the fear was there, etched in every breath. A prince, a father, standing at the edge of reason and despair. After nearly 20 minutes, George's temperature finally began to drop. His eyelids fluttered open, his voice faint. "Mom, I'm so tired." Catherine broke down, pulling him into her arms, unable to speak. "Doctor." Halford exhaled slowly, though his eyes stayed fixed on the monitor. "He's stabilizing, but we must keep close watch. I recommend immediate transfer to the isolation suite at Kensington Palace tonight. No further risks." William nodded sharply. "Prepare the car. I'm going with him." "Sir," Dr. Halford interrupted gently, "given the sensitivity of the situation, I strongly recommend air transport. And, with your permission, this matter must remain strictly confidential, shared only with the Crown Prince and the designated medical team." Catherine looked up, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "Doctor, what do you think it is? Is it dangerous?" He hesitated. "I can't say for certain yet. It may be a viral reaction, but these rashes, they're not typical. We'll need immediate testing." Silence fell. A faint breeze rustled through the trees. William placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, steady and reassuring. "I promise everything will be all right. We're taking him home now." The helicopter lifted off into the fading light of dusk. The red beacon reflected across Catherine's face as she sat bent over her son, gently brushing the damp hair from his forehead. William sat beside her, silent, staring out at the darkening horizon. Below them, the green forest receded into shadow. Inside the cabin, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor mingled with the steady thrum of the rotors. No one spoke. Dr. Halford adjusted the IV line, jotting quick notes on his clipboard. William's eyes stayed fixed on George. The weight in his chest grew heavier. Deep down, he knew this wasn't just a passing fever. The unease crept in slowly, quietly, like a shadow that knew something greater was coming. The helicopter cut through the night sky, leaving behind an evening that had begun with laughter. Now there was only silence and fear. They landed on the east lawn of Kensington Palace as twilight settled. The air was damp and cold, tinged with the sterile scent of antiseptic from the onboard medical bay. William carried George in his arms, Catherine walking beside him, her face pale, eyes red from hours of crying. No one spoke. Only hurried footsteps echoed against the stone floor as staff rushed to open the isolation suite. George was laid on the bed in a sterile white room, soft light glinting off medical monitors. Dr. Halford and two nurses moved swiftly, checking vitals, connecting IV lines, adjusting sensors. On the monitor, George's pulse and temperature flickered in constant rhythm. Each beep made Catherine hold her breath. William stood nearby, his gaze locked on his son. He reached for Catherine's hand and said softly, "He's going to be all right. They're doing everything they can." But even he felt his composure slipping. As a father, he wanted nothing more than to hold his son and cry. But as the future king, he had to remain calm, measured, even in fear. Catherine sat by the bedside, gently brushing the damp strands of hair from George's forehead. His breathing was shallow, his skin flushed from the fever. "My sweet boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. No one in the room dared to speak. Outside the door, royal security stood guard, and the media blackout was absolute. 3 hours later, Dr. Halford stepped out of the room, removing his glasses. His expression was grave. "The situation is stable for now," he said. "We're still awaiting blood results, but this doesn't appear to be a simple fever. I recommend continuous monitoring for the next 24 hours. William nodded, offering quiet thanks, then turned to Catherine. She hadn't moved, still watching her son's small hand resting limp on the sheets. Her shoulders trembled as silent tears returned. William placed a hand on her shoulder. No words followed. Outside the palace walls, News of the royal helicopter's emergency landing had already begun to spread. Headlines appeared across London. What's happening at Kensington? The palace issued a brief statement. Prince George is under medical observation due to a minor health issue. The royal family asked for privacy at this time. But inside those walls, everyone knew the truth was far more serious. Somewhere else. Inside the quiet countryside manor of Mill House in Wiltshire. Camilla sat back in her armchair, sipping a glass of wine as the evening news played softly. When her aide entered the room, she barely glanced at the newspaper and gave a faint, dismissive smile. Another overreaction, she said coolly. A child has a fever, and the whole country loses its composure? Your Majesty, Prince William and the Princess of Wales have been with the boy since this afternoon. His Majesty the King has already called the medical unit. Camilla set her glass down, her voice turning cold. Charles is too sentimental. Everyone knows George will be fine. Let them handle it. I have better things to do than perform sympathy. She stood, draping a thick cardigan over her shoulders, and stepped into the garden. The dim light caught strands of silver in her golden hair. At Mill House, Camilla always felt freer than anywhere inside the palace walls. Here she could see old friends, visit her own grandchildren, the children of her former husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, without worrying about the image of a queen consort. When the housekeeper asked whether she wished to return to the palace in the morning, Camilla gave a faint smile. No need, it will pass. I just need a little peace. The next morning, King Charles received a report from the royal medical team. He sat quietly by the window, face heavy with concern. George was his beloved grandson, bright, polite, so much like William as a boy. When he learned Camilla had no plans to return, he immediately instructed his private secretary, "Tell her to come back to the palace. Whatever her reasons, she's still George's grandmother. Her presence matters." But the response came curtly. Her Majesty says she wishes to avoid further media attention and believes Prince George is receiving excellent care. Charles tightened his grip, and on the pen in his hand, he said nothing, only looked out at the gray courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Outside, the clouds gathered, warning of rain. At Kensington, Catherine remained at George's bedside. The boy was awake now, though weak and pale. She forced a smile, her voice trembling. "Mummy's here. Darling, you can rest now." William sat beside her, his hand clasped around hers. He knew. Catherine's tears weren't only from fear, but from the loneliness of feeling abandoned by her own family. That afternoon, Dr. Halford arrived with the test results. He spoke quietly to William, his face measured. "There's no sign of infection, but we did detect an unusual immune reaction. We'll need to monitor him for a few more days. For now, His Royal Highness is stable." Catherine let out a shaky breath, tears spilling again. William gently squeezed her hand. Neither of them spoke. Meanwhile, at Mill House, Camilla was walking through the garden with her two-step grandchildren. Their laughter echoed across the sunlit lawns. The housekeeper approached again, announcing that the king had called once more. Camilla frowned. "Charles worries too much. I'm not a nurse. They can manage." She turned away, her gaze distant, eyes fixed on the bright blue sky. To her, this was just another fleeting disturbance in the endless cycle of royal drama. She had long believed that distance was the only way to protect herself and her power. Later that evening, William stepped out of the hospital suite to take a call from his father. "My son," Charles said, his voice low and tired. "Look after Catherine. I'll try speaking to Camilla again." William paused, then replied quietly, "I just wish the family could be together. At least now." Charles sighed. "So do I." Night fell and the palace lights stayed on. Catherine sat beside George's bed, holding his small hand, her eyes fixed on his peaceful face. William stood close, his expression weary but resolute. Outside, rain began to fall, and hundreds of miles away, Camilla drew her curtains, switched off her phone, and poured another glass of wine. No one knew what she was thinking, but one thing was clear. While the entire royal family worried for George, she chose silence. A silence that made the distance between them deeper than ever. That night, Charles couldn't sleep. He understood now the true danger wasn't just his grandson's illness. It was the coldness seeping through the palace halls, a chill not born of the night air, but of human hearts. 2 days later, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the hospital room, gliding softly over the white tiles. Outside, birds sang gently, blending with the steady ticking of the clock, the rhythm of the palace breathing again after a long night of worry. Catherine still sat by the bed, both hands wrapped around George's. Her face was drawn, eyes red from sleepless tears, but her gaze still carried hope. Then, suddenly, the small hand twitched. George's eyelids fluttered open. His voice was hoarse but clear. "Mom," Catherine gasped, looking up, and then she broke into tears. She bent down, pulling him into her trembling arms. "Oh, George, you're awake. You scared me so much." George looked up at her, his color returning, his familiar spark of intelligence back in his eyes. He reached out, brushing the tears from her cheek with a weak smile. "Don't cry, Mom. I'm okay now." The moment left Catherine speechless. She held her son's hand tightly, feeling the warmth slowly return to his skin. Behind her, William's eyes softened, the weight on his shoulders easing at last. He rested a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder and whispered, "See, our boy's stronger than we thought." The door opened. Dr. Halford entered with 2 nurses, calm and composed as always. A reassuring smile crossed his face when he saw George awake. "Good morning, young prince. You really gave us a scare." George gave a faint nod, a small smile curving his lips. Catherine couldn't take her eyes off him, as if afraid that if she blinked, he might drift away again. After a brief check, Dr. Halford turned to William and Catherine, his tone gentle but assured. "Sir, ma'am, the final results are in. There are no signs of infection or any serious complications. The prince experienced a high fever due to sudden temperature changes and too much time in the sun. The rash was simply the body's temporary reaction to the heat." Catherine almost collapsed from relief. William nodded, exhaling deeply. "Thank you, Dr. Halford. We were preparing ourselves for the worst. The young prince has a rather sensitive constitution." The doctor continued. "We'll administer a mild antipyretic and an anti-inflammatory cream and keep the IV running for a few more hours. After that, just 2 days of careful monitoring should bring a full recovery." William bowed his head slightly. Catherine turned to her son, her face lighting up with the first real smile in hours. "Did you hear that, George? Everything's going to be fine." George nodded weakly. "I know, Mom. I'm just a little tired. That's all." By noon, sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, filling the room with warmth again. George had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep, his breathing steady. Catherine sat quietly beside him, adjusting his blanket, her gaze tender. The fear hadn't completely faded, but gratitude now filled its place. William stood near the window, looking out at the garden, yesterday full of laughter, now still and quiet in the wind. "After this," he said softly, "we might need to be more cautious with our outings." Catherine nodded. "As long as he's healthy," so she whispered. "I'd trade everything for that." By late afternoon, the tension inside the palace had eased. Staff moved quietly through the halls, their faces lighter, their steps calmer. Though the news of George's recovery remained confidential, it spread quickly among those who worked within Kensington's walls. Everyone breathed a little easier. When King Charles heard the news, he immediately came to visit his grandson. The door opened slowly, and he entered, carrying the familiar scent of polished wood. George was awake, sitting up with a glass of water. "Grandpa," he said softly, "I'm okay now." Charles smiled, his eyes a mix of joy and exhaustion. He brushed the boy's hair back gently. "I knew you were strong, my boy. You gave us quite a fright." Catherine bowed respectfully, while William stepped closer. "Thank you for coming, Father," he said quietly. "I think this has made us all reflect a bit." Charles nodded. "Yes. Sometimes it takes the smallest of things to remind us what truly matters. Family." Throughout their conversation, no one mentioned Camilla, but behind Charles's calm expression lingered a quiet disappointment. He knew well, distance isn't always measured in miles, but in silence. That evening, George managed to eat a little porridge. Catherine fed him spoon by spoon, her eyes soft and filled with love. The boy smiled faintly. "Mom, your porridge is the best." His innocent words drew laughter from everyone in the room. William took his son's hand, teasing. "Once you are fully better, you'll have to cook for your mum as payback." The room, once heavy with worry, felt warm again, echoing with small, gentle laughter. Dr. Halford entered quietly, smiling at the sight. "Laughter," he said, "is the best medicine of all. If everything continues this way, the young prince can take a light walk in the garden tomorrow morning." The next morning, the sky was bright and clear, the breeze carrying the scent of lavender from the eastern gardens. George wore a light jacket, walking slowly beside his mother. He gazed at the trees swaying under the sunlight and took a deep breath. Catherine held his hand and said softly, "Remember, no matter how strong you feel, your body still needs care. I don't ever want to see you scare us like that again." George nodded, his voice quiet but sure. "I understand, Mum. I'll be more careful." His eyes, calm and thoughtful, reflected a maturity beyond his years. From a distance, William watched them, mother and son, walking under the morning light. His heart was still, yet full. The storm had passed, but its echo remained. He knew that from now on, every decision, no matter how small, would carry a little more weight. That afternoon, Dr. Halford completed his final report. "The prince is now fully stable," he said. "However, his system is quite sensitive. He's easily affected by strong sunlight and sudden changes in temperature. In the future, any outdoor activity or excursion should be planned with greater care." William thanked him, while Catherine quietly watched her son play with a set of wooden blocks on the bed. George laughed, his rosy cheeks glowing in the soft light. "Looking as bright and healthy as ever." She whispered, "As long as he's safe like this, nothing else really matters." As the sun began to set, the last golden rays streamed through George's window, filling the room with warmth. Kensington Palace slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But in everyone's heart, the incident had left a quiet mark, a reminder that even in palaces of silk and power, nothing is more precious than the calm breath of a child. In that gentle evening glow, George leaned his head on his mother's shoulder and murmured, "I love you, Mom." Catherine smiled, saying nothing, just nodding softly. Outside, the London sky was clear and peaceful, as though every worry had melted away, leaving only stillness after the storm. The next morning, news of Prince George's full recovery spread quietly through the palace. The nurses smiled more. The halls felt lighter. Yet beneath that relief lingered a silent unease, how Camilla had chosen to remain silent through those turbulent days. This time, she had been right. George had only suffered a common illness, no different from any other child's, a fever from the sun and a sudden shift in temperature. But the truth did nothing to erase the chill her absence had left behind. To many, she remained the woman who stayed away when the family needed just one word of care. To George, only 9 years old, she was still called Grandma, but only by title, not by warmth. William had always known Camilla and Catherine were never close, but he hadn't imagined she could be so indifferent. While everyone in this palace had lost sleep worrying about his son, she had been enjoying quiet days at Mill House. Catherine never said a word, but her eyes told the story, a look colder and more distant than ever, as if their connections now existed only out of royal duty, not affection. Charles, meanwhile, grew quieter than anyone had ever seen him. Over those days, he had tried to be the bridge, to keep peace, but when he learned that Camilla had refused to return even after his request, His disappointment turned into a deep, weary sadness. He knew too well that the image of a wife once desperate for public acceptance was now collapsing, not in the newspapers, but in the eyes of her own family. A trusted advisor had whispered to him, "Your Majesty, sometimes indifference hurts more than cruel words. It makes one realize they were never worth caring for." Charles had only replied softly, "I know." And I fear that from this day on, what Camilla has lost isn't just public sympathy, it's this family's trust. At family meals afterward, something in the air had changed. When they spoke of George, there was laughter and relief. But when Camilla's name came up, silence followed. Even the palace staff whispered among themselves, "The Queen isn't the same anymore. She seems to have forgotten that it's kindness, not titles, that earns respect." The press never learned the details, but within the royal walls, the damage was done. Catherine no longer made polite gestures of formality. William grew distant, avoiding mention of Camilla in private talks with his father. And Charles, once determined to mend the bond between his wife and his sons, now stayed silent, as though he too had run out of reasons to defend her. They say sometimes it takes only a single moment to reveal a person's true nature. And in those hours of fear and uncertainty, Camilla had shown the royal family exactly who she was, not through words, but through her absence. George had recovered, his laughter echoing again, but the fracture remained. A child might forget, but the adults would not. From that day on, no one spoke of Camilla as a kind grandmother anymore. In the gilded halls of the palace, a quiet phrase began to spread, soft but certain. "She may wear the crown, but she will never have the heart of a grandmother." Behind the crown and all the rituals, they were still human, capable of love, fear, and gratitude for the simplest moments together. Love, whether humble or royal, remained the only thing that could carry them through every storm. George has recovered, the moments of fear have passed, but the lesson about love and care will last forever. What do you think of how the royal family handled this situation? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to follow for more updates on Prince George and the family of Prince William.